So today we're joined by Petra Kováčiková, who is a monitoring specialist at DigIQ and the head of the DigiData team focusing on monitoring analysis. Petra, thank you so much for joining us on Zooming In on Hate. And I'll just tell our listeners briefly about DigIQ. So it's an extremely forward-thinking Slovak civil society organisation, and you work at the intersection of digital citizenship, media literacy and online human rights.
That's true.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about the situation in relation to civil society in Slovakia right now. How are things looking? What's the outlook?
Things are devastating, unfortunately. There is a sharp rise on very anti-NGO rhetoric in the country currently, and we see that it's translating from narratives into real leads. We have a new legislation, I can maybe say directly against the NGOs. We have politicians attacking the work of NGOs in the country. So yeah, the image is quite grim. Funds are being cut down. And what worries me the most is that the narratives don't come from the fringe voices at this point. The narratives are supported or spread directly by the government, politicians, and it's really undermining the work that the third sector has been trying to do, building a democratic society after the fall of communism in 1989.
So it doesn't sound too hopeful, and it's a common theme that we hear in Zooming In on Hate, where civil society is under attack, and because of, the great work they're doing. If civil society wasn't doing such a good job in holding governments and non-governmental sectors to account, they wouldn't be under attack. So that's one small little bit of solace with the current situation. But how are the civil society organisations, the NGOs in Slovakia, coping under this extreme pressure?
I'm quite proud because this situation has really brought us together. So we continue the battle, we continue providing the services. And the work of the NGO sector is so extremely important because we are really filling in the gaps in areas or topics where the state doesn't have the capacity to act, and sometimes where it doesn't have the willingness to act.
So, you've seen a big decrease in funding for civil society organisations this year. The State Department has cut almost all funding. What resources are Slovak civil society organisations reaching for?
So we mostly use the finances we can get through European projects, Serve, Horizon projects. But I would lie if I said we have no support from the state. We were able to get some funds through Ministry of Education, but mostly on activities that they see as non-problematic. But as soon as you touch anything with hybrid threats, intolerance, it gets a little more complicated. One thing I would mention, this year the Parliament passed a bill that requires NGOs to publish all the list of all their donors, all the funding they get, and they are also required to give information about this to anyone who asks. So it's not just state institutions, it's any individual who reaches out. This could be framed as trying to increase the transparency. However, first of all, it creates an enormous administrative burden, which is problematical for small NGOs who don't have the administrative apparatus to cope with the demands. And second of all, this legislation really was framed since the beginning as kind of a revenge to the NGO sector. The original proposal that thankfully was amended, but the original proposal contained phrases like NGOs are lobbyist groups, NGOs are foreign actors. This is why it was dubbed as Russian law by especially the opposition and the progressive media. The legislation sparked enormous protests all around the country because the legislation really starts to mimic the legislation that there is in non-democratic countries. That really goes against the NGO sector.
That's a pretty frightening development, and that law came in April of this year of 2025. So it's called the Foreign Funding Disclosure Law. Mm-hmm. Does the average CSO understand how to adhere to this law? Is there clarity around it about how it's supposed to be implemented?
Mm-hmm. No, it seems that the government really isn't seeking transparency, but is kind of trying to, catch us. Since, the law is applicable since June this year, NGOs are putting their heads together to try to figure out what we really have to do. We are trying to create our own manuals because we really weren't given any clear instructions. And we just need to figure it out because there are fines in case that we don't comply with the new rules.
Yeah, that's a tricky situation to be in. How are NGOs coping with this, with the new law, with the current landscape?
It's a difficult situation when you have to work in an environment where you are framed as an enemy. It really affects our funding. It really affects our reputation as experts. And, this, of course, eventually it affects the services that we can provide for the society. So, yeah, I'm not very positive in like what is coming for us.
So, Petra, I'd like to ask you about the online world in Slovakia. What kind of safety concerns do you have, and particularly in relation to human rights?
Mm-hmm. So my biggest concern is that technology is really evolving so fast and we are not able to catch up promptly. And in the meantime that new legislation is being crafted, 5 new challenges emerge. And once we cannot react in time, the phenomena just get normalized. What I see in Slovakia is that the society, but also I would say law enforcement themselves, don't pay so much attention to online crimes. It's seen as, the downside of the online world that we have to cope with. We can't really do much about it. And this is very dangerous, especially in society that is as vulnerable as the Slovak society. I'm speaking about very low media literacy, very low digital literacy. When we compare the countries in some statistics that are made across the CEE region, Slovakia really scores very, very low. I would say this is partially the effect of the quite rigid educational system that doesn't put much emphasis on building critical thinking, but also the historical legacy, the complicated history, creating a culture of distrust, culture of frustration, very low trust in mainstream media, which makes the site extremely vulnerable to misinformation, disinformation campaigns, but also this victim mentality and trying to look for solutions outside. So we're in this kind of paradox situation, and this is why education is so extremely important. And when we see that the mainstream education, or let's say what students get in their everyday school experience, cannot catch up with that, we really need to put our work in with the NGOs. And this is something that we are trying to do at DigIQ. The organization has been mostly focusing on educational initiatives. Since the founding in 2017, we have schooled about 15,000 school children across the entire country. We lead a very successful program for high schoolers. Every year we take about 15 to 20 teenagers who receive very professional training, and then they act as peer educators in their community. So we don't just want to, passively give information. We want to motivate young people to think about what they are facing and become the co-creators of the solutions.
Sounds like a really wonderful initiative. So I'd like to go back to the online world. Well, so social media platforms, the very large online platforms, how is collaboration between civil society and the very large online platforms working, particularly in the framework of the Digital Services Act? I'd love to hear how collaboration is going and any progress with the DSA behind you.
The collaboration is quite marginal in the environment where social media platforms treat users as their clients. They don't feel much need to reach out to us. And of course it differs between different platforms. We have quite a good cooperation with TikTok that is quite active in really communicating about the problems we face. With other platforms the situation is not very good. So one activity we have been doing at DigIQ since our founding is hate speech monitoring on social media platforms. We cover all the biggest platforms in Slovakia, which are mostly Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and TikTok. So we have thousands of cases reported to platforms over the years. The paradox is that since DSA became an obligation for platforms in case of removal of illegal content, the results are getting worse and worse, which is tragic. So talking a little bit about the statistics, in the last 3 years we have been reporting as a standard user to test how platforms react to a normal user, anyone who is willing to report hate speech online. We mostly report illegal hate speech, which includes, really terrible pieces of posts and comments, incitement to brutal violence, genocide, murder, torture, awful things. And it's so sad to see that platforms over the 3 years removed about 5 to 10% of the content we flagged. What is very interesting is that we cannot identify a pattern. They used to deal with the reports. Sometimes platforms would remove content that is just a mere insult and would leave an incitement to genocide against a certain community. This is something that we are trying to communicate to the platforms, but it's very hard to reach them. And I feel like because of the DSA backlash with, Zuckerberg and Meta cutting down their initiatives, it's harder and harder. Extreme case for us is YouTube. We have 0 feedback from YouTube in the last 3 years. None of the issues we flagged were removed. And the process is you write emails and emails, you try to find who is the right person to contact. They might not respond. If they respond, nothing really changes. Part of our work is trying to figure out why is this happening. Our hypothesis was first that it is because Slovakia is a small country, Slovak is a small language. The platforms might not have enough personnel covering Slovak language. But it gets interesting when we compare our results with our partners across the EU. We have similar countries with similarly small languages that are much more successful. And we are realizing that this is more about personal connections. And, you go to a conference, you find the right person, you have a nice chat, and they tell you that, all right, we will look into it. But this is not a systemic measure. We need a systemic solution, a real change. And I'm hopeful that DSA will really have this effect.
Yeah, so, my favorite question to ask, how is DSA implementation going in Slovakia? Have you got a digital service coordinator in place? Have they started recruiting trusted flaggers? What are your thoughts?
DSA is implemented in Slovakia. We have a national coordinator. The communication is really good with them, so I'm positive about that. However, we are only at the beginnings. There are no trusted flagger to this point. We have just applied, so we are hopeful that we might be the first trusted flagger in Slovakia. Maybe it would be interesting to discuss why there are no trusted flaggers. Because despite the coordinator doing a good job, there is not much motivation for civil society organization to apply. I feel like the whole Trusted Flag program is proposed as a service for us rather than something that we can do as an extremely beneficial work. So there is no financial incentive or much recognition. So from what I know, many organizations that were thinking about applying just decided that it's so much administrative burden that they would just not apply.
We were hearing it very regularly across from INAC members here in Sofia at the moment, and from EOH partners as well, that it is at the stage where it's actually time-consuming and quite onerous for civil society organisations to become trusted flaggers. The process is arduous. There is no remuneration, and reporting is a big burden. So it's not just pro bono, it's taking on a lot of extra responsibility. But it's wonderful that you've applied, and any idea how long the process will take before you hear if you've been awarded trusted flagger status?
So because we are the first one who applied, it is not quite clear what the procedure will be like. And we don't know, even if we ask the coordinator, they are trying to figure out what they really need to do.
Yeah.
But probably in a few weeks we might get some information about how it's going.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you the best of luck, Petra. I hope you're awarded trusted flagger status and get to implement the DSA swiftly in Slovakia as well, because there are many threats coming to undermine the Digital Services Act from external non-EU countries who don't see the value of regulation and online safety as much as we in Europe do when in protecting fundamental and human rights. But so best of luck. Thanks for joining us on Zooming In on Hate.
Thank you.